I've come to find that 2 to 3 sentences happens to be like just enough to get things going.
But it's enough to get them engaged, and
Right.
that's the whole point.
Yeah.
Because they've got to be engaged. You've got to have an activity that they're doing, whether it's a game or the card or whatever it might be. They've got to be engaged, and that's, again, came up as so important, because if it's just passive learning, they're not going to hang in there. They're not going to do it.
Some of the comments remind me of years ago in a previous position. I spent a lot of time in classroom visitations when I was a dean of English many years ago, and had a lot of new faculty would come in, especially adjunct, who were bright people, well-intended, but very, very limited practitioners. Mm-hmm. And I used to go in and sit in for the whole hour, roughly, and I got to the point, one of my questions was, prior to, I would asking him, what are you trying to achieve today, and what are you going to do, and how are you going to do this, and how are you going to know if you're successful? And then at the end, we'd have our post-conference. One of the first questions I would ask is, how much time do you think you talked today, relative to how much students talked? And the newer folks were almost always missed it by miles.
Right. Underestimated.
They always assume they only
tremendously.
talk for 5 or 10, 15 minutes, and that students talked a lot more. And so you would kind of go through that, and then work to really get them to understand too that, with how we learn, that what we perceive students are muddling through things, and we lose patience for that. But the value of just listening and letting that happen in some sensible, managed way is really, really important. In exchange for, I talked at them. It's just a different version of showing them really nice slides with names and dates on that. But so some of the comments just remind me of that experience. But I think all educators, go through that evolution. We don't start out where we really want to end up and where we are now. So it's an evolution in our own thought process too, as to what we value and what we look for.
We have to, reflect on our own performances as educators and think about what we can do better. Sure.
I thought you were saying what's something that's very interesting there, I'll touch upon that Steve said. If anybody wants to take advantage of this, if you've never had classroom observation where all that's done is the person observing your class scripts your class, where they just go in and they say, okay, class started at 9:03, there were 14 people there, 5 males, 9 females. The instructor asked a question, student responded this way, and just script what actually happens and the nonverbal things that happen. That's a real eye-opener. When we had the year-long orientation and mentoring program, that was part of the program where we did a classroom observation, and the mentor would go in and script the classroom. And anytime I went through with anybody I was mentoring, that script, people were just amazed on what they learned and the types of things that, observations that can be made and things that you learn from those observations. So if anybody's willing, if they want to do that, just out of curiosity, I'd be willing to go into your classroom and do that. It's a fun little exercise.
Good, very good. I have my own. But I do think we all have to kind of think about ways to engage students. And you know what? It seems to me that in community colleges, especially with the broad array of students that we get, engaged discussions should be wonderfully fulfilling for you as well as the students, and they should be able to happen in a way that really is truly educational. Think about it. If you're talking about, let's say, Desert Storm, and you're at a university and you got a class of 18-year-olds, what kind of discussion is that going to be, right? I mean, there's not enough history there. There's not enough knowledge. They haven't lived long enough. They haven't experienced things. But chances are in a community college classroom, if you had a discussion about Desert Storm, there's going to be somebody in there that either served in Desert Storm or know someone who did and can speak from the heart about that experience. And that makes for engaged learning as well. So there are lots of opportunities with the types of students that we have in community colleges to really pull them into whatever the class is, whatever the discussion is, and take advantage of their knowledge, their experiences, their life experiences, because they've been around. Some of them have been around long enough to have some truly meaningful experiences that will contribute to the conversation that you have in class. So, engaged learning, one of those things we know, but just a reminder that it too rose to the surface of the reasons that students stay in college. They have to be experiencing engaged learning. And the sixth item that came up was one that we referred to a little bit earlier, is that students benefit from having a personal network that allows them to obtain information about college services, along with academic, social support. All of that is critical to student success. In my previous role as president, we had a group of students that would be selected every year that would meet with the president, and we would just talk. We didn't have an agenda. It was just sit and talk time. And sometimes I'd meet with those students and be like October 27th, and I'd ask, how many of you been to the library? And I get questions like, I didn't know we had a library. Where is it? Oh my gosh, you know, and I'd be just shocked. But I think we can't take for granted, what that told me is we can't take for granted that they're aware of all the services that are there, nor do they know how to access those. So help them learn where the library is, where the tutors are, where the Success Center is, and do what you can to point them in those directions so that they can access all those services. It makes a difference. And like I said, because they don't know what they don't know, we have to purposefully create networks